You're psycho. You are psycho. What the hell is wrong with you people? You all belong in the loony bin. Every one of you. Forget you guys. I don't need you. You think you're so happy and you're so damn great because you work in a freaking record store. You think you're so superior. Hey Joe, Lucas steals $9,000 from you. You don't do to him. So you gonna give me a job now?
Sequel. Reboot. Which one will it be? It's the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, Starfighters. This is Ruined Childhoods, your favorite podcast celebrating cult and classic movies and imagining how they could be brought back today. We are shin deep in our road trip across America, celebrating a movie that represents each U.S. state for each episode. Last time, we were in Connecticut, specifically the town of Mystic, and on this episode, we are in the first state, aka Small Wonder. If your state fish is the weak fish, you may be from here. If your state flower is the peach blossom, you just may be from here. If your name is Aubrey Plaza, Judge Reinhold, Elizabeth Shue, or Hunter Biden, you were born here unless you just happen to share a name with someone famous. On this episode, we're in Delaware celebrating the songs, styles, and attitudes of Gen X. Dan, you were on the cusp of 18 when Empire Records came out in 1995. Did you see yourself in this movie? Were you represented amongst this crew of misfits?
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of.
So one of the things about this movie is I think it tries to cast a wide enough net, and there are elements of characters, I would say, of any character that I identified with, probably AJ of all of the characters. Yeah, especially
the
at
moody,
that time.
artistic, the dreamer.
Yeah, the artistic dreamer who's got this that was kind of more high school, but also I would say around that 18, 19, that just oh yes, how am I going to tell my crush? How am I going to reveal my that kind of making it, it's it's a really big moment, and
yeah,
I remember it was I feel like I connected with that more so than anything else in this movie.
I don't see any of Mark in you. I don't see any of Eddie in you. I don't see any of Burko in you. That's for sure. I don't see any of Gina in you. Not so much Corey. I mean, maybe 1% Corey.
Yeah.
If
no,
any.
If you're wondering, John, I'm agreeing with your assessment thus far. Are you going to see a little bit of Lucas in there?
Oh, well, okay, we'll get to Lucas in a second, but I will say, actually, I'm gonna bump up Corey a little bit. I'm gonna bump up Corey a little bit just because you have a taste in certain styles of music that people your age don't typically have.
I did, especially at that time.
At that time, yeah, you were probably more
now
to some music.
Now it kind of doesn't really. Now it doesn't matter. I'm 46. I like a lot of things that people my age like. I like a lot of things that people older like, and I like a lot of things that people younger like. And
sure, yeah,
there's just it's a big sloppy ass Venn diagram there. But at that time, when in 1995, and when I was that age, I definitely had that taste, and I would have, so Rex Manning, I feel like among a lot of different people, he's kind of supposed to be a Donny Osmond type of character. And I'm a cop to this. When I was 11, Soldier of Love, Donny Osmond's big his big pop single, Soldier of Love, came out and it hit the charts. And it's, by the way, it's the late 80s version of like Rex Manning's song. I keep wanting to say I Adore Me More, but I know it's not that.
Oh.
And I don't have it written
Say
down
no
in front of
more.
me. Say no
Mon
more.
amour.
Say
Yeah.
no more, mon amour. Okay, close. So I had the single of Donny Osmond's Soldier of Love.
Wow. Did you really?
Like a thief in the night who can't get enough. I am willing to fight 'cause I'm a soldier of love. Yeah, like a shot in the dark.
Wow.
Wait, when I don't know. I know bits and pieces of the. I know enough. Okay.
This is some Dan formation that is new to me, and I've known you for my entire life. So that's wild. I didn't know that you had Donny Osmond singles. That's pretty cool. I also
singular, singular.
Okay,
One
singular.
single. That was. I don't even think there was a
Okay.
B-side. I just had the A-side. That's it.
Wow. Well, I can definitely see you around that time still listening to bands like The Monkees, which I know you listen to currently, but even still, like at around 18, 19, I could still see you. And also, you love Meatloaf. And even though I think that Meatloaf is another one that kind of like maybe people were really into. Well, when did Bat Out of Hell 2 come out?
Okay, I thought you'd never ask. So Bat Out of Hell 2 is released in 1993. And
Okay, so that's just right before this. Okay.
And that was when I got into Meatloaf and then was kind of gotten into Bat into Hell retroactively. And I saw Meatloaf perform on the Bat Out of Hell 2 tour in 1994 at the
Wow.
Meadowlands Arena, as it was called then, the Meadowlands Arena.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I feel like in addition to Meatloaf, Donny Osmond, I would say that of the characters in Empire Records, Corey may have been also the only one that would have listened to like Chris Isaak. And I know that you were really into him.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. You don't think AJ would have been into Chris Isaak? If anybody else would have. No.
I don't think
Corey,
I don't think AJ. I think Corey, definitely not Deb, definitely not Lucas.
No, I agree with you on all of this.
Okay, cool. Why don't
Yeah.
I do a little bit of a synopsis? And I have a whole thing where I break down each character. So for anybody
You're synopsizing my musical tastes of the mid-90s right now.
You can pick me apart as much as you want. I can
No,
volunteer information.
It's not relevant. It really is not. John, honestly, it is not. I mean, like, let's put it out there right now. We're on the topic. So why wait? I know you're going to give the synopsis, but so like one of of many songs spotlighted in this movie are the Gin Blossoms. You've got the Gin Blossoms in this movie. Now, the Gin Blossoms were the opening band for the first concert I ever saw, which was first real concert I ever saw,
right,
in the summer in July of 1993, and the Gin Blossoms were opening for UB40.
See, UB40 is another one.
But they had the number one single in the country at the time, and possibly, like, if not the number one album, like a top album in the country at that time.
Okay.
So 2 years later, when Empire Records came out, not so much.
Not so much.
But,
right.
But at the time I saw them, big, but Gin Blossoms opening band. So like I was into Gin Blossoms.
Yeah, totally. Gin Blossoms were great.
So I was on the cutting edge as well as like on the very dull end of it.
I listen to Gin Blossoms regularly now. I listened to them maybe a week ago. Not because of Empire Records.
No, just because sometimes it's nice to listen
great.
to a Gin Blossom song.
Sometimes it's nice to have a new miserable experience.
I have no follow.
All right, shall I synopsize?
Yes, please do.
All right, here's a synopsis. There is a trigger warning for self-harm. All right, here we go. On the evening before washed-up Tiger Beat teeny bopper has-been Rex Manning is set to appear at music store Empire Records, employee Lucas discovers that the beloved haven for local music lovers is set to sell out and become a corporate Tower Records-esque franchise called Music Town. Tasked with depositing the day's $9,000 earnings at the bank, Lucas instead decides to head over to Atlantic City and potentially save the store. However, he loses the $9,000, setting up Rex Manning Day for failure. Store manager Joe, a defeated 30-something who acts as a cool uncle figure to his group of misfit employees, has to find a way to stave off snooty store owner Mitch while he figures out what to do with his surrogate children. Speaking of which, let's have a little rundown. One of the more reliable employees is AJ, a talented artist who feels like he's not meant to be successful at his craft. However, the one person who believes in him is his mega crush, Corey. Corey is a well-educated goody two-shoes on the surface, but struggles with a pill addiction and resentment towards her BFF, Gina. Gina is an assertive teen whose confidence is linked to her sexual liberation. However, she secretly harbors resentment towards Corey due to Corey's idyllic family life and intellect. Also dealing with troubles of her own is Deb, whose family life is non-existent and is fresh off a failed attempt to end her own life. And even though he thinks it's his fault, she tells her boyfriend Burko that he didn't do anything wrong. Burko is a fixture in the Empire Records break room, seemingly tasked with only bringing lunch to Rex Manning. But this is just his day job. Burko is also the frontman of a rock band. Another employee with rock and roll aspirations is Mark. On the surface, Mark is a burnout, but his enthusiasm seems to be the heart of the record store. Mark is also close buds with employee Eddie, who also works as a pizza guy and weed brownie chef. And we can't forget about Warren, the store's young shoplifter du jour and wannabe employee who can't seem to stay away from Empire Records. The shit show of events that all seem to fall on Rex Manning Day both brings this group together and tears them apart as they try to find meaning in their individual and collective young adult lives. So as Joe, we have Anthony LaPaglia, who's just perfect, I think, in this role. Very exasperated, trying to figure out what to do with his employees who just seem to be kind of failing him at every turn, especially Lucas, who's played by Rory Cochrane. We have Ethan Embry as Mark, back when he was Ethan Randall. We have Johnny Whitworth as AJ, Robin Tunney as Deborah, just before her, I think, major breakout role in The Craft. Renee Zellweger making not her on-screen debut, but certainly one of her first big appearances as Gina. Liv Tyler, who at this point was pretty much just known for Aerosmith music videos, is Corey. Coyote Shivers is Burko. Brandon Sexton III is Warren. Maxwell Caulfield from Grease 2 is Rex Manning and is, chef's kiss, perfect as Rex Manning. Debbie Mazar plays Jane, who's Rex's manager. And we have James Kimo Willis, who plays Eddie. And then Ben Bode is Mitchell, the store's owner, who gives one of the best line deliveries when he comes in. And he just goes, "Why do I feel like I'm getting screwed?" And he just kind of like has this moment where he's just like such a perfect villain for this group. I love it.
Yeah, he really is. I feel like your delivery of his delivery makes me appreciate his delivery all the more.
I just love it. It's like, "Why do I feel like I'm getting screwed here?" And he like puts up his hands. It's so good. But yeah, so Dan, tell me, full honesty, what are your thoughts about this movie? We can say like past tense around the time when this kind of came out or became popular on home video and today.
Yeah, I mean, so speaking to it becoming popular on home video, I don't remember this playing in theaters. It might have played in Manhattan.
It hardly played in theaters.
Right. So
it was out for like maybe 2 weeks.
I think the soundtrack was better known than the actual movie. And the soundtrack had some hit songs. It had Till I Hear It From You, and it had A Girl Like You, Edwyn Collins. There, in the film itself, there are a lot of other songs.
Way more songs.
Video Killed the Radio Star among them. but so the movie, I saw it on VHS. It was a Blockbuster rental. I can almost guarantee you. And I felt iffy about it at the time, and I didn't know. I felt lukewarm about it at the time. And now I think I realize why. And I
Okay.
view it as a very mixed bag movie. There's so much about it that I really like. And I think it really is trying to do a lot. But I feel like, and when I say it, like it's a collaborative effort. I don't want to necessarily, point the finger at like the screenwriter, the director, the cast. I think that everyone kind of does their best. I just don't know that they necessarily knew how to address some of these topics. And I think some of that perspective from me comes from that there's been almost 30 years of research and a lot more information. And in my work at teaching high school, I come into contact with a lot of that research, and just knowing a lot of the statistics about depression, suicide, pills, just self-image, the damage, slut shaming, which is a big part, of this movie. There are a lot of other elements of this movie that I know they're signs of the times, but there are some like tasteless homophobic jokes strewn throughout.
Classic mid-90s. There's going to be a poor homophobic joke.
Absolutely. And I think that in its trying to call attention to and recognize the different like types of teens, the different, I guess, subgenres, and that doesn't change. That is consistent throughout. We can go back to our Rebel Without a Cause episode and talk about it. So you've got, I think in doing that, it minimalizes it. This movie doesn't have the space to really address those issues.
Yeah.
It's a movie that has all of these and so many logic holes in the plot the whole time. I don't think I recognized this when I was 18 watching it, but now watching it, I'm thinking, if this place is in such trouble, why do they have like 12 people all on the clock at once?
Yeah.
Like at opening, I don't know what day of the week it is. I don't know if Rex Manning Day fell on a weekday that year.
Let's assume it's a weekend, because it's a pretty well-populated store at all hours.
Yes. Okay. Let's assume it's a weekend. Even if it's a weekend, even if it's a popular store, and it's a big store, we are given the impression there's a lot of space. There's a lot going on in that store. But still, I would say that there was, and also it seemed like the kind of store where you could just come and clock in wherever, which was very much my experience working at West Coast Video, which was, if I had nothing to do on a Saturday afternoon, I would go there and clock in and just hang out. So that there's a lot about it. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot about it that gets just kind of like cornered into a like almost pigeonholed. Like I said, there's not enough space to deal with things, so they're just kind of like labeled and put there, and they're treated with these lines. Like, I think a lot of the dialogue that Robin Tunney has, I'm blanking on her character's name at the moment. Deb, a lot of the lines, and I admire the performances are so good. And this movie reminds me, it reminded me of watching Mystic Pizza and thinking about Roger Ebert's famous quote from his review that this movie is going to be famous for the stars it made, and the performances from these people who are on the cusp of stardom. And you ran through the list, and and we've talked about a lot of Ethan Embry, nay Randall, has already been with us on our road trip at Sweet Home Alabama.
I know. Yeah.
So like it is with all compliments to the cast, but like some of the lines that she has, it's like, oh, we're trying to cover this complex issue, And also I think it speaks to the fact that there's almost a bit much of the, like, every female character is having some sort of breakdown. And I understand, again, we are trying to play reality, but when it all happens on one day, it comes off as, oh, teenage girls are crazy. That's
right. It is unfortunate that the people who do seem to be having the most critical crises really are the female characters, who are all interesting in their own ways, but you're right. There wasn't enough time to appropriately deal with what was going on. And also it's oddly distributed because there are so many other cast members. There are so many other characters in this.
right. And to add to that point, you have Lucas, who takes $9,000 and loses it all in Atlantic City. What a great setup for that, by the way, when he walks through the casino and is just like everything. He just randomly like pulls the crank on a slot machine and it hits the jackpot.
It hits. He calls 22 on the roulette wheel. It goes, but he's not betting at the time. It's just
no.
It's just
perfect.
like, there's something magical about this guy. Yeah.
Right. It's perfect. He gets to the table and he starts hitting, and you're like, oh no, because the higher he flies, the harder he's gonna fall. But you know what though? He's all right. And we find out later that Lucas has been through a lot in his life, and that there is a connection he has with Joe.
Yeah, Joe is his foster parent.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Joe is they're borrowing from Little Shop of Horrors, basically, where Joe is the Mr. Mushnick here, who takes in young Lucas, and like, I think he probably treats him a little bit better than like giving him a cot in the back room of the shop and making him sweep up. But like, he takes him in.
Although I did hear that, I think it's, somebody said that Burko lives somewhere in the store. I didn't catch that at all in the movie, but I heard somebody in an interview saying that, and I was like, I didn't catch that one bit. It wouldn't surprise me, though.
Maybe on the roof, because
it's a huge building.
There's
a whole upstairs in the back that we don't see.
Yes, it's huge. It's probably like, honestly, there's a lot of ways in which they could downsize, but that's beside the point. I wouldn't want them to. I love this record store. Yeah.
So Dan, I do want to just let you know a little bit of the backstory. So first of all, there was like 40 minutes cut out of this movie. So perhaps if there was to be a director's cut, it would fill in a lot of those blanks. Would it give the appropriate attention to some of the more major issues going on? Probably not. But I don't know if we'll ever know. Something also to recognize is that Carol Heikkinen, who wrote this movie and also wrote Center Stage and The Thing Called Love, this is based on, I believe that she worked at Tower Records. Somebody who she worked with was telling her about an employee who did steal like the day's till, and, you know, I don't know if they gambled it away or something, but they stole it, and the way that it was dealt with wasn't very standard. It wasn't an expected response. They did end up having to like pay it back in installments. They didn't like throw a rooftop concert to like, get all the money back. But there was some sort of story behind it. And I agree with you in a lot of ways about how uneven the movie is and the representation of the major issues that are in this, which I think if for 1995 sensibilities, the fact that it's being brought up in the first place is kind of like, we did it, you know? Well, and these days it would be Deb would just be the movie herself, or Corey's pill popping would be a movie in itself.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's not from, it's not misintentioned. It's not malintentioned, whatever the appropriate word there is. It's just that it doesn't have the time, space, or perhaps even the understanding yet of a lot of these issues.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So
So I
I
agree with
made
you. Yeah.
great. Hey, cool. I made a bunch of different lists, and one of them is things that don't quite make sense. One of them is things that seem slapped in haphazardly, which also could be a result of things getting cut and completely messing with the other scenes. And the other thing is things that I loved. And I
Okay.
would like to start with the things that I loved, because I remember, before rewatching it for this episode, I remember not loving this movie. I always felt like it's not for me. I had seen it a few times and I never quite fell into the camp of like, oh, it's Rex Manning Day, all that kind of stuff. Because Rex Manning Day has become a thing that people celebrate on April 8th. They celebrate Rex Manning Day. So some of the things that I loved the costume design. I thought that every character was so perfectly represented by their wardrobe. For a movie that takes place all in one day, the wardrobe is so important. This is, this is their skin. This is everything about them has to tell a whole story. And Lucas wearing all black, and he's like the philosophical kind of beatnik kind of a guy, and AJ, who's kind of like, he wears this big old grandpa cardigan, and he's very like flowy and go with, just going with whatever kind of attitude, and it's representative in his clothing. We have Gina, who's wearing like a cardigan with no shirt underneath that's very low cut and a very short skirt. We have Corey, who's kind of having like a bit of an identity crisis because she's got this like big sweater on, this like kind of mohair sweater. But then she also has this short skirt on because, she's going into Rex Manning Day intending to sleep with Rex Manning and lose her virginity. So it's kind of like she's the goody two shoes, but she wants to make sure that it's clear that like she's not all that good. What are you laughing at?
Really, no, I'm laughing because it's really interesting. I don't want to I don't want to feel like dirty for pointing this out, but like, so you mentioned that, and it made me think of just kind of like an observation while I was watching the movie, because she's offering herself to Rex Manning. And I thought it was interesting that somebody who was intending on being seen in their bra and panties by someone that they are intending to have sex with, they're not coordinated. Different color
the
bra
underwear
and
well,
panties. Yes.
and that is a victim of the cuts that were made. Because if you remember the scene in which Corey and Gina are like having lunch together, and that's where, Corey slut shames Gina, she removes the bra underneath her shirt, and she gives it back. And I believe that there's a scene in which Gina says, "Here, wear this bra because it's sexier." And I think that's where that comes in. And it's then become,
wow.
yeah, see, that's the thing, is like there are things that are that don't make sense because of cuts that were made in editing.
Like, it definitely didn't throw me off, but I was just like, that's interesting. I was also like, okay, she's also like, this is, for all intents and purposes, a kid who's
sure. Yeah. So just kind of rounding it out, Deb's wardrobe, it's kind of just like a crop top tank top and she's got like a hoodie. It just kind of feels appropriate for her character. Then we have Mark, who's wearing kind of, I don't know, grunge. He's kind of got like a grunge look. Like he's known skater. To be like skater. Yeah. But I don't know. It just works for the character. And Joe, I think he's dressed up a little bit more for Rex Manning Day, but he goes in wearing a tie, but as soon as things start to get really tense, he goes in and finds out immediately that this money hasn't been deposited. The tie goes away, and he just becomes a little bit more like the others toward the end. The shirt comes untucked, and all these things kind of happen to make him fit in over the course of the movie with the rest of the crew.
what I think is interesting about his look, especially by the end, like when he comes out and has his rant in front of the whole store, he kind
Yeah.
of looks like the anti-Rex Manning, which
Oh
is
yeah, for sure.
which is interesting because he also comes across the performance, the wardrobe comes across as somebody who maybe wanted to be a rock star. You know, he's got his
Yeah.
drum set, right?
He has his drum
So,
kit in his office. He has an earring, which at the time was like a symbol for I'm edgy.
yeah, it
If
was
you're a guy.
a
Yeah.
lot less common and a lot less mainstream,
Yeah.
acceptable. But
Right.
he definitely seems that like that was like, 20 years ago, he was maybe gonna have a shot. And now like,
Yeah.
he's cool with it. He runs this record store. But yeah, like going corporate that's like, no, like I gave up the rock and roll. I gave up rock and roll as a career, but not as a lifestyle.
Well, but his hands are tied with the Music Town thing because,
Right.
as we find out, he's been saving up this money in order to kind of buy himself out and buy out the record store so that he doesn't have to kind of be under Mitch's supervision and his desires to turn this thing into a big franchise. So, he's got so many elements of the rest of his, Gen X crew, and it's he's kind of I think it's like he's almost resigned himself a little bit, especially now that he's kind of in this back and forth battle between like, I had this opportunity to make something of my own with this store, but I am being torn in this other direction where it's like it's being taken away from me by my employee's bad decision and who didn't know all the details. And yeah.
Well, and in turn, also his bad decision to trust Lucas with that.
Right, because this was Lucas's first time closing the store. So
Yeah.
also, I want to move on a little bit of the things that I love, because also along with costume design is the set design. Because I mean, Dan, how much fun would you have had hanging out in any corner of that store?
So much fun. I would have spent
Yeah.
an entire day in there easily.
It was dialed in every single way, on the inside and on the outside. It looked like the coolest place in the world. And who could blame Warren for wanting to work there? Because it seems like it's such an awesome little family that they have there. And it's, he fits in so perfectly because he represents a different element of the kind of Gen X counterculture.
Right.
He's into metal and rap, and he's a delinquent, and he can run his mouth, but he can also hang with everybody, and he's embraced by them despite all of that he's put them throughout the day.
So I just thought of it. You said, all right, he's into metal and rap. So I realized that the downfall of Empire Records, as we know, is not going to be whatever Music Land or Music Town. It's going to be Warren, because Warren's going to introduce them all to like Limp Bizkit in a couple of years, and just like,
well, the real downfall is going to
everyone-
be like Napster.
I mean, yes. There's a lot of real downfalls of record stores beyond corporate. There's no Music Town anymore either. In fact, there's more.
Yeah.
There are more independent music stores than.
It's true. Well,
chains.
and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So kind of
What else
going
do you
through my
love?
list. I also love, even though the movie is messy and weird and a lot of things don't make sense, it's still really fun to watch. It's just weird. It captures a certain, I don't know, style of that time that is very specific to the mid-90s that I don't think fits with other eras.
I agree with you. I think something that was fun for me to see was it was a really nice time capsule, and not to sound cliche, but seeing them without phones
Oh, absolutely.
was refreshing. And
Well, not just without phones, but also I felt like the store phone was so cool because it was, beat up and ratty, but like it was very active. I don't know. That's the one like phone element that I actually really loved about this.
yes, yeah. That was great. And just looking at it and saying like, oh yeah, like that, there's an element to it that is very realistic and relatable, especially if you worked in any type of store like that. So having worked in a video store,
Mhm.
we didn't quite have fun the way that they had fun, but we
Yeah.
would do things like if it was slow in the middle of the day, we'd take some printer paper, crumple it up, and then we'd take some empty like VHS boxes, like shell cases, and
Uh-huh.
we played baseball. You'd have
Okay.
we had it all set up, and like there, if you hit the cardboard standee for there's something about Mary, like if you hit Cameron Diaz, it was a double, and if you hit the Alfred Hitchcock standee, it was a triple or whatever. So we had fun. We did things like that. We would play the same movies over and over again and quote them.
Yeah.
So it was similar to the vibe at Empire Records. Empire Records, just of course being a record store,
Yeah.
cooler, higher cool factor. Also, it was pretty big record store, and
Sure.
you'd also have like 8 people working at once, and
At
they
least.
they were all really close.
Yeah.
It seemed.
Yeah.
So I mean, even the customers, I feel like, knew who they were.
Yeah, and we'll get to that more soon, but I wanted to mention one more thing that I loved about the movie, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the weirdness. One other thing that I was thinking about, because I watched it a few times to prepare for this episode, and what I came to realize is that, and I don't think that this was done intentionally, but this movie is probably a really great movie to watch if you have ADHD, because there are a lot of elements to it, and I'm not saying this to make fun of anybody or to I don't know, single
No.
anything out, but there are so many elements that I feel would really work for somebody who's maybe thinks differently to appreciate this movie, because that maybe if you're looking for something that's a little bit more straightforward, or like a David Fincher movie or something like that, like it's not going to feel like that. There's like literal sound effects. At the beginning, when he's drumming on the money, you hear drum sounds. And then when Warren is talking about being in a car, you hear like a car revving up sound. And there's all these like different sound effects that are very literal. The music is very literal. There's a version of Hey Joe that plays when you see Joe and he's really upset.
Right.
And, there's a lot of things that are like connecting the audio with the visual that you typically don't see in movies. Also, there's a lot of fourth wall breaks, especially from Lucas. We also have one from Mark. We also there's something to look at in every frame. There's something going on. And this is just also the nature of it being a cool indie record store. There's posters all over the place. There's stickers all over the place. There's flyers. There's cool, weird things. There's, Butthead in the background on the board. There's like all these things that you can notice. But also, when it's time to focus up, there's literally a buzzer noise indicating that the music is stopping. There's a buzzer, and it's like, listen up. Something is about to happen that you have to listen to. So I think that in a way, it's kind of a great movie to watch if you're somebody who has a hard time focusing on plots or lots of dialogue. It gives you those opportunities to kind of go in and out. So
That's a really interesting observation. I would be
Thank you.
so interested to do like an experiment and do more research into that and say, are there certain films that people with ADHD like can and
Yeah.
should check out.
I did look up some things, and what I found were movies that talked about ADD and ADHD. And then also there were lists of movies that somebody with ADHD was able to sit through. And Empire Records was one of them. So
Okay.
I was like, okay, so confirmation, but it's like that could be for a number of reasons.
It's also a
but
brisk
anyway-
90 minutes. It's a 90-minute movie, which is in many ways serves it. It might not serve its
Sure.
treatment of some of the more serious issues, but to your point, that running time, I think, really helps you keep the movie moving along and a lot going on.
Yeah.
While it is happening.
Sure. So I want to talk now about things that didn't quite make sense in the movie. And we could either breeze through these, or if there are things that you wanted to talk about, some of the things we've already covered, like so many people work there. Like that's one thing. It's just like, why is the staff so big? Maybe you could have not been, burning through so much money if maybe Eddie didn't work there or something. Because I don't even know if he seems to at some point. I don't know. So
He
one of the
clocks in.
things,
Doesn't he clock in?
he clocks.
Doesn't he take a
Yeah,
time
he does
card
clock
and-
in. He clocks in. Burko clocks in. The people who you don't
Right.
actually see working, you see clock in.
Yeah.
So Debbie Mazar's character, Jane, quitting to Joe didn't make sense. And Joe is all upset about it, probably because then it's like, oh, I have to deal with Rex Manning now. But it's like, oh, that doesn't make sense.
But that's not the upset that he seems. The upset that it seems is where it seems like there's some connection between them, like they didn't just meet.
Oh, from what I can tell, it's their first time meeting.
There's the scene that Joe, Jane, Joe
Right. Yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
So,
You
like,
see them meeting each other. Yeah.
they do meet. So now I'm
Well,
wondering,
unless
what-
we are to assume that they are their same characters from So I Married an Axe Murderer 2 years ago.
Yes.
In which case they had
Yes.
met.
But that's what I was wondering, because that's another thing that to me never really sat right, was that they seem to have this pre-existing relationship. And I'm saying, am I carrying that over from So I Married an Axe Murderer?
Getting electrocuted. Sorry, that's just Debbie Mazar. Okay,
Yes.
so one thing that I want to mention, and I was thinking of this when you said the people in the store who seem to have, this part, like they're part of the story. I did not like the moment when there's the ballerina listening to music on the headphones and Mark is like sexually assaulting her. He's like getting up in her face, about to kiss her, and then she like notices him, and then he grabs her foot and kisses her foot. Not cool. She clearly does not know him.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's something I didn't love, that whole scene. Joe being mad that everyone is dancing to Rex Manning. And I say this because the customers in the store are dancing as well. So why get so upset in that particular moment about that particular thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is spoiler territory, but Mitch selling the store to Joe for cheap seemingly comes out of nowhere.
It really.
All we
does
know
not
about
make
Mitch
sense.
is that he just wants to make money, and he wants to turn the store into a cash cow. And then he stands behind the counter for 2 minutes and is just like, forget it, you can have it.
I love the backstory where it was like a toilet supply shop that his father turned into a record store. And Mitch is like, if we had stayed in toilets. And I think Mitch is a great representative of that kind of that 80s generation. And I would be making like toilet supplies are so much more profitable than records. So I liked that aspect of Mitch, but yeah, it makes no sense that Mitch, who's all about money, is just like, fine, give me this bucket of cash and I'll work behind the counter for a few minutes. and begrudgingly like someone comes up with a coupon. He's upset about the coupon.
Yeah. Also, it's just like there's so many people there. He should just be like, damn, this is going to be a good sales day, you know? But instead he's like, why am I getting screwed here? Sorry, I just love that line. So one other thing that really didn't make sense to me and didn't sit well with me is how okay everyone is with Joe hitting Lucas. You know, Lucas took $9,000 and really screwed things up for everybody, especially Joe. But to physically assault him, not okay. And
OSHA
it's
violation.
Kind of like, well, right, but it's like, yes, it kind of falls into two different categories. You know, he is his employee, but he also was his like foster child. And Joe, I mean, Lucas, I'm sure is like over 18 and that falls into a different category and everything. But like, it's just so not okay on so many different levels.
I thought about that when I was watching it, and I wondered if it was more that at the time, and like, at the time in an actual workplace, yes, that is not believable. There would be problems. There would be follow-up, no matter what the relationship between employee and employer is or isn't, there would be follow-up. But
yes,
I think that as a plot device, it was something that at that time, I can't think of any other movies where that happens, but I'm sure there are other similar things that we just said at the time, oh, well, that's how this is resolved. And we know that now that they're good. I'm not agreeing with it. We know it's not healthy.
Right.
Then again, it's also, there we go. We've got some of that instability there being applied to a male character.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But of course, there's no recourse for it.
No, not at all. No. Another thing that didn't make any sense, and this cannot be explained by anything at all, is that at the party at the end, we see girls wearing nothing but underwear and Music Town aprons. And it's like, none of them were there when Gina did this. There's nothing to base this off of. It just doesn't make any sense.
It just becomes a music video shoot.
Absolutely.
That point.
Yeah. All right. So there was also a lot of things that seemed to be slapped together haphazardly, such as AJ's decision to go to art school in Boston.
Yeah.
Did that not seem so out of nowhere to you?
Yeah, that was quite a swerve. That's something that you just kind of, decide to do and figure out and lock down and, within a couple of hours. And
perhaps there was another scene that explained that. I don't know. That maybe it just shows him thinking or writing in his notebook and it says like Boston College with a question mark. Like, I don't know, like a list of schools in the area. So I don't know. That one seemed to be just like, what's going on? And that kind of leads me into what I'm sure you are dying to talk about, which is the faux funeral scene where they are going into this trying to make Deb feel appreciated, and Deb acknowledges like, what up guys? This is about me. But, AJ makes it all about himself and talks about being too afraid to go to art school. This is the first time we've ever heard about art school. And then 2 scenes later, he's going. Corey changing the subject to Gina, even though it was her idea to do this whole thing for Deb. She's too wrapped up in her bullshit with Gina. Gina brings up wanting to sing in a band. That seems like it comes out of nowhere. And then, of course, 2 scenes later, she's singing in a band.
Knows all the words to the song.
Look, that one, who knows? Whatever.
Yeah. No.
Lucas's whole bedwetting thing, I felt like there are different ways to bring up the fact that Joe brought you in without doing this little thing about being a bedwetter until he was 10. I don't know.
Being abandoned. being abandoned, but not because he was a bedwetter.
I know. It's like he tells this whole thing and he's like, that's not why I was abandoned. So I just told you all that for no real reason. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely felt. I agree with you there. I don't want to disrupt your list before I. I respond.
Well, that was definitely just like that whole faux funeral scene. I felt like had potential. It gave Deb the impetus to talk openly about her experience and, what it was like for her to have this self-harming experience. And it's just like we were saying before, it's kind of like the magnitude of that situation is not appreciated by the characters in the movie or the movie itself.
Yeah. You know? I wondered with the funeral if they were trying to, if it was acknowledging or intentionally like the very somewhat similar faux funeral in MASH.
Huh.
In which
I hadn't even thought about them.
Yeah, there. I forget the one, but there's the one guy who's very depressed and talks about suicide.
Yeah.
And it's where we get the song "Suicide is Painless."
Yeah, the theme, right? And that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. The MASH connection.
I doubt that you're going to be a filmmaker, especially one working in the 90s, who would have been aware of Robert Altman, certainly, who would have not have seen MASH.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's definitely inspired by, but I felt like the way that it was done in MASH, there was something about it where it's like the whole idea of this guy, and it's been a minute since I've seen MASH, but the idea of him where he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna, commit suicide. He's very lackadaisical, right? Because he thinks that he's gay. Is that what it is?
I forget. It's been a minute since I've seen MASH as well.
I think that what it is like they tell him that he's probably gay, and so he's like, oh, well, then I'm gonna kill myself. And then they have this funeral for him, and then one of the women sleeps with him, and then the next day he's like, oh, no, we're good.
Right, right.
I want to say that that's what happens in MASH, right? It's
very satirical. It's funny. It
the
fits
tone
in with the movie.
The tone is very different from this. Yeah.
Right.
So,
yes.
In a different scene, of course, actually just following that, this is where we have Warren saying that he wants to work at Empire, which comes out of absolutely nowhere. Right. And this is like, he's got the gun and he's like, you all think you're so superior. And I feel like it's so close to being dialed in. And he's like, you think you're so great because you work at a record store. And it almost felt like there could have been an exchange that got him to being like, well, why would anybody hire me? Like, you would seriously hire somebody who just like robbed your store and is holding it up at gunpoint. And it's like, well, do you want to work at a record store? And he's like, you all seem like you've got it all figured out. You've got it all together. That could be the moment that kind of makes it click for them. And, but instead it just comes up out of absolutely nowhere. So anyway, there's that.
And it's another one of those like, hey, there are a lot of other things that are coming up with this character that are definitely not being addressed or taken seriously. But that's kind of beside. I agree with you. I feel like it is close to being dialed in, but is right. It falls short. It's again. I feel like they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know what they had there.
I mean, I felt like it did help you then connect, like when Lucas, he's like, you would hire me, and Lucas goes like, well, he hired me. Of course, Warren doesn't know the backstory or anything. He's like, it seems like Lucas kind of has it all together with all he knows is that he stole this $9,000. He doesn't know the whole thing about his upbringing and how Joe kind of like plucked him and, you know, cared for him. So I don't know.
But
another
then
one,
maybe
and
he
I
can
think,
be the next.
but he doesn't know the whole backstory. So
No, I know.
anyway,
Yeah.
so the Corey's pill popping is another one that I think that there were probably some things that were cut out. You know, we definitely have her at the beginning mentioning how, you know, she was up all night making cupcakes and all these other things and whatever. And then, you know, we see her taking a pill after a confrontation with AJ, after she tells him like, oh, but I don't think of you that way. And then, you know, he kind of storms off and then she takes a pill.
Doesn't she take a
then it's
pill
just
after
like-
the Rex thing happens?
I don't remember.
I feel like there's something like she comes outside
After the Rex thing, she just goes up to the roof. I don't remember
Right.
if she had the pills there. But
There's
anyway.
another thing I think is a staple of Gen X films of the 90s. You have to have your rooftop scene.
Oh,
It's in this, it's in Reality Bites, it's in Clerks, it's in I'm missing a couple. Singles, are they ever up on a roof?
Singles,
No,
they're on balconies.
Singles, they're a balcony. Singles is less of a rooftop movie, but Seattle is also less of a rooftop city. So
There you go.
maybe. Yeah.
So I've got one other thing that just seems completely nonsensical, slapped in haphazardly. Okay, the Guar scene. I think that everybody can acknowledge that this scene was totally weird and out of place and doesn't make any sense. Nevertheless, it's still fun. But Dan, I feel like, you know, we are living in a time where in many places in the United States, marijuana is legal to purchase and consume. And we can openly talk about how it works, especially when you are ingesting it through food. He's taken a bite of this weed brownie and suddenly he is hallucinating and is transported into another world. That is not how marijuana works. I'm sorry. That one doesn't happen. Also, if you are eating a weed brownie, give it 45 minutes before it kicks in. It's not like an instant hallucination.
My note here is I assume Mark is not on his first brownie.
I mean, even still.
Because of the fact that he's already that high, but also the fact that he's apparently also tripping. So
yeah,
maybe
he's not high.
Maybe there was a scene cut where Eddie also talks about adding LSD. He just says there's extra sugar.
I know, which I think is just his cheeky way of being like lots of weed.
Right. Yes, that's exactly what I assumed. But no, this is not, and I know, and I feel like it is one of the more iconic scenes of the movie. It's one of the more standout scenes when Mark sees himself on stage with Guar being consumed, and I think it's really funny, but it's filler. It has nothing to do with anything.
Right, but it's, I don't know, it gives the film a stronger identity as something that isn't going to be like anything else, and it does help it in a way, even though it like completely doesn't make sense.
It does set up when Mark is behind the counter all alone and the other like 19 employees are all in the back. It's during the funeral. During the funeral. Mark is...
But I feel like that would have been the same had he had brownies or not.
Right, but when I watched it, and there's not enough of that scene to show...
Yeah.
Oh, Mark is dealing with all this. If we went back to another hallucination, it would work better if we revisited that. But I did think like, oh, you could have done more with that. You could have connected it. And maybe that's why he's so panicked. But you're right. It's not set up to show that, oh, he's panicked because he is like tripping balls on weed brownies.
Yeah. So the one other thing that I wanted to bring up about this movie that is not actually part of the movie itself, but we are recording this episode, this Empire's Records episode, during this series where we're talking about the different states for our Delaware episode. And in so many lists of like iconic movies set in Delaware, this movie is like number one next to Fight Club. And nowhere in the movie is it acknowledged at all that this takes place in Delaware. There is nothing to even allude to it. It was not filmed in Delaware. It was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is not Wilmington, Delaware. And I was really confused by this because there's nothing that indicates that this is Delaware. And my assumption is that people saw filmed in Wilmington and assumed Wilmington, Delaware, and not Wilmington, North Carolina. But it's just been it's just been attached to it.
I would say that the only, and this is grasping at straws here, that Lucas rides his motorcycle to and from Atlantic City in
which at midnight takes between an hour and 20 and an hour 40 minutes. I Google mapped it. So
yeah,
it can't take place in North Carolina because geographically he wouldn't be able to get back by the time he gets back.
Right.
So it needs to be close enough to Atlantic City, which, by the way, this is our second episode in a row where there is an unintentional Trump connection, but that's just because he passes, Trump. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of impossible to miss.
Yeah. Also in mid-90s Atlantic City, it's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Different connotations than now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that. I can't think of any other. I can't think of any indications that Fight Club takes place in Delaware.
Okay, so I talked to my friend Nick Krill, who some people may know from the Spinto Band, also the band Teen Men. He is an audio engineer for a lot of really incredible musicians on the East Coast, and I asked him about Delaware films. And what he said is that, Dead Poet Society was filmed in Delaware, but I think it takes place in Massachusetts. So it's filmed there, but it's not set there. And then he says Fight Club takes place in Wilmington, but I don't think people really know / represent that picture. And he says, for me, it would be Empire Records, but I don't think that resonates out into the general public. So in Fight Club, it does reference Newark, and there are license plates and addresses that are Delaware. I couldn't find any license plates in Empire Records or anything, any signs indicating, like there was one show poster, but it was referencing Emo's, which is in Austin, Texas. So I was like, well, it can't be Texas. You can't get to Atlantic City and back between midnight and theoretically like 9 a.m. or something. Yeah.
I think I might have always assumed it was Jersey.
In one IMDb trivia or goof thing, somebody says New Jersey, but everywhere where you look at lists of Delaware movies, it's like number one on the list. Also, it's like, I'm just going to go to the Wikipedia page, and it's the first line in the plot. At independent record store Empire Records in Delaware. That's how it starts. Like, I don't know where that came from. I did send a message on Instagram to Carol Heikkinen, who wrote the movie, to just ask her, could somebody please explain to me what's going on here? And I just never heard back from her. But granted, I only messaged her about 4 hours ago. So that remains a mystery, but the internet has decided it's in Delaware, so we will just accept that.
I'm down with that. I'm cool with that. There's enough there. And I don't know. I have no explanation for this, but it does feel more Delaware than it doesn't feel Pennsylvania. It doesn't feel New Jersey. Anywhere where you would be going to Atlantic City like that.
Yeah.
Of all the
yeah.
states, it just feels Delaware to me. So I'm cool with
Right.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those oddities, I think. I think that somewhere somebody said Delaware and it just caught on. I think that that's just a piece of information that, sprung up, not relating to anything, and just kind of went viral in a way. But it doesn't make sense, but we're okay with it. And we've decided.
Makes enough sense.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the ongoing legacy. I said before that April 8th is known as Rex Manning Day. And that's essentially just an annual recognition of the movie Empire Records. Ethan Embry said that it should be April 8th because that's the day that Kurt Cobain died. And so it's kind of like, an icon of the generation. It kind of had this day kind of attached to him, and it's kind of a way to kind of celebrate the day in a different way. So, yeah, I don't know if you've ever celebrated Rex Manning Day, taken off from work or anything.
I think I've recognized it, and it normally falls on a weekend, so I don't. No, I don't. April 8th. So Rex Manning Day is 2 days after my son's birthday.
Oh, yeah. Another bit of Empire Records legacy is that it has been adapted into a musical. 2018 is when this started. And then in 2021, there was they workshopped it and did like a stage reading of it. There hasn't been any news since then, but I'm sure that, things can just move slowly. I certainly hope that it is still happening, but Dan, I want to know what would you want to do with this?
All right. So I think what this calls for is a kind of a straight up remake.
Okay.
And this is where, and there are a lot of elements I would want it rewritten, and I would want it set in 1995. I think I would want a lot of the same songs, and I would definitely want the same costume design. So not necessarily a shot for shot remake. This is not a Gus Van Sant Psycho, but a remake, a revision, something that takes Empire Records, and yes, we need to recast it, but take Empire Records and rewrite it and, right the wrongs.
It needs to be refined.
There's so much about it that I really wouldn't change. And that brings us back to the costume design, because one of my notes and one of the things that I definitely thought about in this remake was like, I want the same costumes.
Oh, yeah.
I think I want the same songs as well.
Sure. Yeah.
I think just different actors, not because there's anything wrong with these actors, but they cannot
aged out.
Yes. So get yourself a cast, and the fun in this casting, because I have no suggestions for anyone playing the the teenage roles, but it's fun thinking about, all right, who would play Joe? Who would play Rex Manning? Who was the teen heartthrob? Who were our teen heartthrobs in 1995? Like, I would love to see Leonardo DiCaprio as Rex Manning.
He'd be a good Rex Manning. He'd have fun with it.
I would love to. The only thing, it would be a little close to Rick Dalton, but.
Well, I
would
think
still love to say, or like Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire, who was supposed to be in the movie.
Oh,
Did you know that?
In Empire Records?
Yeah. So, okay. Part of the whole thing with Empire Records is they all kind of housed up along the shore in in North Carolina, in Wilmington, North Carolina. And they all just partied and did all sorts of drugs and stuff. And for all the time that they were there, they were all together and they were just kind of this big family. And there were like, I think 3 other characters that were supposed to be in this movie that just got cut out. And Tobey Maguire was cast in the movie, and I believe that he was either going to be Lucas or maybe AJ or maybe Mark.
I was going to say, I could see him as Mark.
Yeah. So, but it wasn't like locked in. And I think that he just like, I think I read somewhere that he did like drugs one night and decided that he was going to go back to LA and he was going to write a screenplay. And, you know, clearly things worked out for him, but yeah, he was supposed to be in the movie. So it's funny that you mentioned Tobey Maguire.
Right. Okay. So that would be an interesting.
Okay. So you're just going down everybody in the Pussy Posse.
Well, you know who I was
So
going
is
to go
Ethan Suplee next? Is that who we're talking?
I was going to say Mark Wahlberg would be another interesting.
Well, so if we're talking about a Maxwell Caulfield type, then shouldn't it be somebody who maybe had a big leading role and then kind of slipped into obscurity?
Well, if we're going to try to be accurate about it, that would be fun. Who are you thinking?
Well, no, because I read an interview that Maxwell Caulfield did do, and he said that because of his experience where right before Grease 2 came out, he was like all set. He's like, as soon as this movie opens, I'm going to be a huge star. And then it opened and to little fanfare. And it didn't happen for him. You know, he worked, but like when he thought that he was going to be this big star, it was a very humbling moment. And so to play this character that is experiencing this very humbling day, it could resonate with him. And so I felt like to honor that in a remake, it would be appropriate to kind of recapture that same kind of vibe. I mean, it's Rex Manning, so you can go in a lot of different directions with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm brainstorming.
I mean, if you had like Lance Bass do it, that would be so much fun.
Oh, Lance
you know,
Bass
he would
probably
have fun with it. There's so many actors that would be a lot of fun in that role.
Someone a teen idol that faded into obscurity. Okay. Yeah, I don't have anyone off the top of my head for obvious reasons.
Yeah. But also if you're talking about the like, you know, the younger cast, because if we're talking about, you know, between the ages of like 18 and 25, you know, Coyote Shivers, Burko was probably the oldest one and was probably like supposed to be like 25. If you're going there, I think that what was also cool about Empire Records is that, you know, there were pretty much unknowns. Liv Tyler was from the Aerosmith music videos. Ethan Embry was probably the most successful of them. You know,
he had co-starred in Dutch with Ed O'Neill.
Dutch. Yeah.
And All I Want for Christmas.
Yeah. So he had a bit of a career where people would have seen him.
Yeah.
Renee Zellweger was, well, I guess Rory Cochrane was probably
at that point had Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused. Renee
so it's
Zellweger
a nice
to
little
a lesser
shout
extent.
out to Dazed and Confused in the
store.
the
Have a Nice Day, the little smiley face.
Yeah. Zellweger, I think at that point had done the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie.
Oh, geez.
The one that McConaughey was in as well. Right.
Yeah. So I feel like amongst the cast, that was pretty much it. And so to have a remake with other kind of like unknowns, maybe people who are like maybe on, you know, about to be better known, makes sense to do, honoring, you know, the original kind of. So yeah, you'd want to do a remake.
Yeah. Straight up remake. No need to get high concept or fancy. I mean, the most high concept thing about this would be retaining so much from the original film.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, memorable lines and moments, and I felt like and this probably goes a lot with, you know, what I was just talking about before with the fact that they all just like lived together for the entire duration of the shoot. they did have this chemistry. They did have this camaraderie where it's like you believed that these people, even though they're all these different archetypes, you believe that they kind of come together and they have this relationship because they bond together all the time at this record store because they all work all the time. And even if they're not working, they're there on their breaks from their other jobs or coming in early to do homework, even though they're not supposed to work until later. I don't know, like all these things. Yeah.
That's where life happens.
It's where you go to shave all your hair off. It's where you go to do your boss's taxes inside one of the listening rooms. Anyway, it's
Where
a
you
whole
go
thing.
to have your fake funeral, to eat your pot brownies.
Look, if you have the square footage, you may as well.
You've got a roof
You may as well
for
use it.
concerts.
Yeah.
That's my idea. I have not playing around with the casting is fun because also the casting of Joe. Who's gonna play Joe? And I would definitely like be clear about the relationship between Joe and Jane in my remake.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that's what I will do. But yes, that's my idea. What is yours?
So I thought of a few different things, but the one that I kind of liked the most was this was kind of much bigger before COVID, but in mostly LA and probably also New York, you had a lot of these pop-up restaurants. I feel like it'd be really cool to do a pop-up like record store and like recreate Empire Records, the store.
Oh yeah.
And, you could have rooftop concerts and, you could have a whole like, from 3 to 3:30, there's a Rex Manning, costume character kind of a guy coming out signing autographs and stuff. Like you could do a whole thing. It would do so well. It'd be so much fun.
What a fun way to do it. You could do it. It would be such a fun thing to do. And I would say like, on record store day, but it would
No, it'd be Rex Manning Day.
No, yeah. So it would just, what a fun thing for independent record stores to do, which as we said before, there really are only independent record stores.
Yeah. Well, you and I, we live in, I'd say some of the more bigger cities.
Yes.
Seattle and Portland are both, a little bit fringier than, LA. I guess Austin would also probably fall into the same category as Seattle and Portland.
Yeah.
There's probably some other cities, around that this would work really well in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But even in the areas where that's not the case, not that too many people are buying physical music, but if they are, they're buying it from Walmart or Target.
Yeah.
So there's not, Sam Goody is not around anymore.
Sam Goody is not around anymore. That's true.
Music Town, Music Land, Tape World. What were all the other, all the other great chains.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, but where you and I grew up in Cranford, New Jersey, we had Browsers and Off the Record. Browsers was better for tapes. Off the Record was better for vinyl. Once CDs came in, you saw that creeping in.
Off the Record was there first. Off the Record was
there first.
The OG. Yeah.
Sure. But Browsers certainly, as we've established before, terrible name for a store where you're trying to turn a profit. But it holds a place certainly in my heart as a I don't know, just like an iconic establishment in my upbringing.
Absolutely. We had a lot of great there were a lot of great record stores in our area. Westfield had the Music Staff. Yep. Westfield had a few. They had Sound Station.
Well, we grew up not too far from a Vintage Vinyl, which was a huge vinyl store. I don't know if that's still around anymore, but I believe that was a chain. But
Vintage,
it wasn't.
I think there were two.
Right. There was. I mean, like the franchise. There was more than one.
Yeah.
Going back a little bit, Dan, you mentioned that you used to work at West Coast Video, but that location wasn't that an independent store that got turned into a West Coast video.
It was a Palmer video.
Palmer video, but Palmer was like teeny tiny regional, just a few.
Right.
Where West Coast video was like, you know, a much bigger.
Yeah.
It wasn't maybe this, you know, it wasn't Blockbuster big, but it was close behind.
It wasn't Blockbuster. It wasn't Hollywood Video. I don't know how far the West Coast Video like franchise ranged, but yeah, yes, it was more of the corporate video store.
Yeah.
Blockbuster, I may have shared this anecdote before, but Blockbuster, the most corporate.
Well, yeah, you worked there briefly.
I worked there briefly. It is the only job to this date, and mind you, I work with children. It is the only job that I've ever been drug tested for. And they didn't.
Wild.
They did a hair test.
Really?
Yes.
Did they do it regularly, or was it just when you were being hired?
Just when I was being hired.
Got it.
Yes.
Jeez.
No,
So weird.
No worries. I passed.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, well, I guess it's a good thing that Mark didn't try to get a job at Blockbuster.
No, Mark would not have been hired at Blockbuster Video. They would not have appreciated his. You could not at Blockbuster. I got in trouble for talking to friends of mine who came in while I was like vacuum sweeping at the end of the night. Imagine if I tried eating pot brownies and watching a Guar video.
Wild.
I would have never passed the drug test.
Yeah. Well, I had so much fun rewatching this movie and kind of looking at it through a different lens than I ever had before. If you, our dear listeners, have ideas of how you would want to bring Empire Records back these days, please email us ruinchildhoodspod@gmail.com. There's a link in the episode's description with all the other ways that you can interact with us. And Dan, where are we going on our next leg of this journey?
John, we are headed off to sunny Florida, and we're going to South Beach. And we are going to stay right there in the mid-90s. We are going to go to South Beach, Florida. We're going to the Birdcage. We're going with Mike Nichols, Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, Diane Wiest, Gene Hackman, Hank Azaria, Callista Flockhart, Dan Futterman, I think is his name. Yes, so a wonderful cast, and you know, I could save this for the episode, but it's my answer to the question. I saw a quote for the new movie Dix that's coming out.
Oh, Dix the musical.
And it said something about like Hollywood has finally figured out what to do with Nathan Lane. And I was like, nope, they knew. Like, I was like, first of all, there's not one thing to do with Nathan Lane. Secondly, Hollywood knew what to do with Nathan Lane in 1995. And it's The Birdcage, a great, one of my favorite comedies. And I'm excited to talk about it.
The movie's a blast. I'm excited to talk about it. And
stock up on your Pirin tablets.
Oh my goodness. I have to refill my prescription, that's for sure. So, Dan, as you are heading up to the roof to sing Sugar High, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.